Hello, I'm Simulated Irk and welcome to episode 43 of Simulated Irk Train Simulator. Very early in the morning, I'm pulling an all-nighter, so in the real world I can adjust to some night shifts coming up. Spent a month on day shifts, now I've got a day and a half to basically try and reacclimatise to night shifts. Anywho, on the previous episode of Simulated Irk Train Simulator, episode 42, you may remember that we took possession of a train to test and to basically give it a run before it came into service. Now what we've done, thanks to the power of the internet, is that our train that we saw in the last episode looks totally different on this episode. This is an Azuma train, which is the name that the train operating company is using to promote this particular train, the Azuma. Previously run by Virgin Trains, but they're no longer a train operating company. The Azuma name has stuck, and LNER is the company that is running the Azumas now in the UK. This skin is absolutely awesome. Took me a little bit of time to actually install it, trying to follow some instructions that weren't there, but we managed to do it in the end. A bit of trial and error looking around the internet and that sort of thing. I'll leave a link in the show notes, but Alan Thompson is a YouTuber himself and also has Alan Thompson Simulations, and this is where this reskin has come from. We're at Peterborough Station, which is where we finished the previous episode, and we're going to head back into King's Cross. So we'll have a look at the outside of the train. So the previous episode was basically a blank canvas, if you like, as if it was undelivered and still hadn't been put into the different train operating livery. There's a few different train operators that operate this type of train. LNER is one of them. So we'll have a look at the front. There's our dude, Simulated Irk. Hey Drive, how you going? There he is, Azuma. The name was brought in by Virgin Trains originally. Virgin Trains, unfortunately, from my point of view anyway, lost that contract. But LNER, here we are. So we'll go down the platform and have a look at the different carriages on the outside before we go into the cab and have a look. So we'll have a look at the back. Of course it looks the same as the front, and that's looking pretty sweet. Now, to make this video a little bit different from the last one, running it in the opposite direction from King's Cross to Peterborough before, now from Peterborough to London, King's Cross, and also put in a little bit of snow as well just to make things look a little bit different. Let's have a look at the inside with the passengers. Now that doesn't look a lot different than before. Maybe I haven't installed something correctly, but it doesn't look any different here. But if we go in the cab, certainly looks different here. This bit looks the same. However, if you look at the screens here for the train platform interface, they obviously haven't simulated the images of the train on the platform. We'll open the doors and see if that has any effect. It probably won't, but in real life the camera images would come up there. It's not necessarily something easy to simulate with Train Simulator and, you know, everything like that, but the cab basically looks the same. That's the major difference. The monitors for the cameras. So we'll go outside. The doors are now closed. It does look, I've got to say, it does look pretty sweet. So there'll be lots of chances to have a look on the outside. Looks pretty sweet. Let's get in the cab. Let's go for a drive. So reverser in forward. We've got snow to deal with. So we'll have the wipers on because I want to give you a clear view as well. A little bit of horn. Well, as it turned out, a lot of horn. And let's leave Peterborough now. So we'll get onto the high speed section and then we'll give you a look outside of how this reskin looks. It looks fantastic. As I said, I had a little bit of trouble with installation, but these things can happen. Having a look around on the internet, it's not just a me problem, so I'm glad to report it's just not a me problem. So a slow run out of Peterborough. Heading back down towards London. A snowy day. So of course the reskin doesn't affect the way that the train drives because the reskin is merely cosmetic. Track speed now 105, so we can crank things up and have a look outside. So we've gotten up to speed pretty quickly. It's now 115 miles an hour. We can see a guy with a forklift. He's holding that forklift, doing forklifting in the snow. Okay, so we can just do some coasting now. This is a sweet view. See the snow flying up now. I've never actually driven in snow. Well, I've never driven a train in snow in real life. There were a couple of times that, because I'm in Australia and where I am in Australia, it doesn't really snow all that often. Being based out of Sydney, we've got the Northern Line that I operate on, the South Coast Line and the Blue Mountains Line. Now the Blue Mountains is where it would snow if it was going to. Now it may only snow a couple of days a year. Now they're actually predicting that there might be some snow today, as I'm recording this early August, because we are in winter. We get the August winds and whatnot. It's the Katoomba Mount Victoria area, which is between about 1,000 and 1,200 metres above sea level. That's pretty high by Sydney standards, by Australian standards in terms of mountains, high above sea level, but in terms of overseas, that's not very high at all. Sometimes they will get snow in the upper mountains area, basically anywhere from about Wentworth Falls up to about Mount Victoria, which is basically the summit, and then down to Lithgow, which is the other side of the mountains. It can happen once or twice a year if you're lucky. It happened earlier this winter, when it wasn't really winter, it was just one of those freaky cold days where it snowed. And when it snows, it's not like snowing for days or anything like that. It might be just a one day, a few hours. Sometimes it's just sleet. I saw one of my colleagues the other day new on my side of the fence, and he thought that he'd seen snow on the ground, but it's just basically frost. There was a couple of days that recently, within the last couple of months, that I thought it might have been snow, but I was actually sick when that happened, so I didn't necessarily crank it up to track speed now 125. There was a couple of days where I thought it might have been going to snow, and I was sick, so I didn't want to put myself in that situation. And I was on night shift as well, so if it was going to snow, I would have seen it, but it turned out it didn't snow anyway. I can remember as a child living at the bottom of the Blue Mountains, basically at sea level, and you'd hear on the radio or on the TV that there was snow, but usually didn't go up and see it. Quite interesting, actually. The first time that I actually did see snow was in Tasmania, but the strange thing about it was in December, which is in the middle of the Australian summer. I'd gone down to see a friend down there and hang out, and I didn't think of snow in Tasmania in December. Went out to a party with my friend, and the next day we decided to go bushwalking at Cradle Mountain, and it wasn't actually snowing while I was there, but it had snowed overnight and there was snow on the ground, so that was the first time that I actually experienced snow. Now, the first time that I experienced snow falling was a few years ago in America. I was in Reno, Nevada, and I'd actually, this is when I was doing audio podcasts, I had actually arranged to meet up with Grammar Girl, who's still podcasting, by the way. Been podcasting a long time now, quick and dirty tips about all things grammar. And we'd actually arranged to meet up in her then hometown of Reno, Nevada. I'm not exactly sure where she's originally from, but she was living in Reno at the time, and I'm pretty sure she still is. And I was staying at the Circus in Reno, and I'd seen on the drive up from San Francisco, I'd seen some snow on the ground, but again, snow wasn't actually falling. It was just on the ground because it had fallen earlier. But I woke up this particular day. We were going to meet up, myself and Grammar Girl, and do an interview for the podcast and everything for my podcast, which was amazing because I just basically reached out to her. She wouldn't have known who I was unless I had reached out to her, sort of thing, as a listener to her podcast. And I remember waking up, I was about 8-10 stories up in the Circus Arena, and I saw the snow falling, and because I've never actually seen snow falling live with my own eyes, I was going to email her anyway to just confirm the details of where we were going to meet up and that sort of thing. And I remember as part of the email I wrote something like, "Oh, by the way, this might sound like a stupid question from the Australian guy, but is it actually snowing at the moment? I think so, but I'm not sure." So she emailed me back, and yes, sir, it is snowing. And so we ended up walking around Reno, walking through the snow and that sort of stuff, and it was quite good. I think it was on the following trip. These last couple of episodes of Simulated Earth have just turned into remembering podcasting vaguely related stories to what I'm doing on the sim. Met up with Justin Wayne from the Justin Wayne Show, a music podcast, and we were where he was living at the time, Walla Walla in Washington. Now, of course, if you're a fan of The Simpsons, you'll remember the time that Homer went to clown college and Krusty was teaching Homer the name of funny towns to get some laughs out of the audience. And Walla Walla just happened to be one of them, and we ended up I did my very first snow angel on the ground in Walla Walla. That was quite interesting, and needless to say, quite cold. There was a lot of snow one time. I went to Chicago and also in Ottawa when I was there in winter, just before I discovered hockey, actually, 2014. It was snowing, so I got to see some Canadian snow, seen some American snow. Have I been in? No, I don't think I've been in the UK when it has been snowing, but I don't really do like going down to the Australian ski fields. I don't really do all that sort of thing. I'm not going to go to a place just because there's snow. Like I might. Just trying to think if it was snowing. No, it wasn't snowing in Queenstown at the time when I went there. Queenstown in New Zealand was great for snow, but it wasn't snowing the day that I went there. But I don't mind it as a novelty. Actually, what I would like to do, just as a life experience then one time, somewhere that's really, 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 really cold, somewhere like Winnipeg, or as it's nicknamed, Winterpeg. The sort of places where it goes down to like something like minus 20 degrees, and at that point it doesn't really matter if it's minus 20 degrees Fahrenheit or minus 20 degrees Celsius at that point. I'd just like to go and live in somewhere like Winnipeg for a winter and to see what it's like. I've spoken to a few people that have lived in really cold climates like that, and you'll say to them, "Hey mate, what do you do when it's like minus 20? Oh, we just put some extra clothes on and we go to work, eh?" That sort of thing. Now, sometimes it just gets that ridiculous where everything shuts down. But in a lot of places like Winnipeg, it's pretty much business as usual, because they have that environment, they have all the resources. New York was another good one. New York was another good one for snow. I remember watching the local New York news one day when it was snowing when I was over there, and the amount of things that were shut down because it was some freaky snowstorm. That even though they do get a lot of snow in winter, it was or I won't say unprecedented, but it was a lot of snow even for them. Just adjust the view. The problem is not knowing the line. I don't necessarily know what's coming up, but I've got to say the reskin is fairly good. It certainly makes a big difference compared to the unbranded train that we saw on the last episode. Certainly different. And of course you do have the old joke about, the wrong kind of snow falling in England. As we have a look at our old mate there. He's doing his best and he's hyped his best, and as I was saying, I've never actually driven in these sort of conditions. I'd like to. My chance to is rapidly going to be expiring because I won't be driving in the Blue Mountains for too much longer. Although on occasions I'm living in Newcastle now, about 3 hours north of Sydney. It can snow in some of the mountain areas near here. I'll just zoom out a little bit, that might be a little bit better. It can snow, but in terms of actually driving my train through snow in the real world, it's probably not going to happen anytime soon. I do, when I know that it's one of those days when it has snowed and I'm usually on a day off or on holidays or something like that, I'm usually, even though it's cold and it's wet and it's the heaters and the train are getting a workout, just for once I would just like to be able to have a drive in the snow and see what it's like. Of course, if it gets too bad, we don't have a lot of the snow clearing equipment that a lot of other countries that usually get a lot of snow have, and we don't have things like heated rails and all of that sort of stuff. So if the snow gets too bad, the trains won't be running anyway. But it would be nice just to do it once. It's like a bucket list item, just to say once, hey, I drove a train in snow and it wasn't in the simulator. Now, one thing that I do wonder, we're driving at about 120 miles an hour. So it's about 200 kilometres an hour. I won't be driving in real life anywhere near that speed ever, I don't think. Maximum I can do at the moment is 130. I'm 130 kilometres an hour. I may be able to do up to 160 kilometres an hour within the next year or so. I'm not 100% sure on that at the moment. But I'm driving this train at 114 miles an hour, which I am now. I'll crank up the speed a little bit. I'm not really sure how effective that wiper would actually be. Now, in a real train, you've got varying speeds. Like you can have it on intermittent. You can have it on fast or slow. But I just wonder, when I'm travelling at this sort of speed, and I haven't been in a train that's gone this sort of speed for quite some time, I just wonder how effective these wipers actually would be at this speed. Now it's not raining heavily, and some of it's probably snow, but I just wonder how effective. I'll just leave that off for a while and watch for some build up just to sort of prove the point. I'm not sure how effective these wipers actually would be at this sort of speed, especially considering that the train, like this train, is very aerodynamic. But I'm not sure how effective the wipers would be. Now, every so often, like there, you will hear a tone. I'll shut up in a minute so you can actually hear it for yourself. But that's part of the automatic warning system, AWS, and it's probably linked to automatic train protection as well. So I can have some sort of advanced warning of the signal ahead. Now I haven't had basically anything apart from a grand signal all the way. So in a moment you'll hear a noise, and that will confirm to me, as we just heard then, that the signal that we just passed is green. Going a bit hot again, so we'll just back it off. It will confirm that the signal's green. Now when we get a bit closer to King's Cross, again, confirmation signal's clear. When we get a bit closer to King's Cross and we start to have signals against us, that will slow us down. The tone will change. Now we're coming up to the station, Arsley, I think it's pronounced, Elysium. We're coming up to the station where on the last episode, obviously heading in the opposite direction, decided to do an emergency stop just to see how long it would take for the train to break. Now a lot more liquid now is coming on the windscreen. Just clear it off as we pass through the station here. So the whole idea of that tone is to give you advance warning that the signal is coming up, and if the signal isn't full clear, you'll get a different warning, as we'll see when we get a little bit closer to London. But it's also good advance warning, especially like in conditions like this. The signals would be hard to see, wouldn't be easy to see rather. We are doing 120 miles an hour. But we're still, at this point, relying on in-cab signals and also the AWS automatic warning system and the APT, automatic train protection. But we've got green lights as far as the eye can see at the moment, so things are going well now. In the real world, obviously, I'd have an idea of when the signals are coming up and that sort of thing, and so I'll have that road knowledge to know exactly how far these signals are apart. So now speed's dropping a bit, so we'll crank it up a little bit. Now I did mention a little bit earlier that in the previous episode we had basically the unbranded train, if you like, the vanilla train with no branding, etc., and this is a reskin. Now so far this is the only reskin for this type of train that I know as of August 2020. that is actually available that I've downloaded of an actual scheme, of an actual colour scheme that is actually used by the actual operator. There was a GWR version of this colour scheme which was on the internet, but I can't find it at the moment. I think the person concerned has taken it off the internet, so I can't download that one. Even though you can do a search, you do a search for Class 800 or Class 801. You'll find images of the GWR green train version of this. There is another fictitious couple of spares that are floating around, but this one, to my knowledge, is the only realistic current colour scheme that you can download and reskin that I've been able to access as of August 2020. If there is another one, I haven't found it yet, but it would be good to be able to find another one and somewhere different, as there are, I think there's about 4 operators at the moment that are using this particular type of train with some variation. Did a little bit of reading between episodes, which in reality was only a couple of hours. Now, it appears as though this model of train is primarily electric, with the capability of short periods of diesel haulage if need be. I think it's the Class 802, which has more capacity for diesel running if need be. Wow, that was freaky. We just got passed by a HST. Oh, we're on that track. We'll go this way maybe. So we're running in classic British parallel tracks at the moment. We're running on what they call a fast track, or what we probably in Australia call the main. And so next to us, the track that's on, the track that you can see immediately in front of camera without the train on it, is what in England they'd call the either the local or the slow line. So you'll see that there's some stations there that'll have a platform for the slow lines, but there's no platform for the fast or for the main line. In Australia, we probably call it a suburban or a local line, and the main line rather than a fast or a slow. Just for that little bit of difference in terminology. Crank up the speed. Crank up the speed again. Wow, that's freaky. I might get back into the cab. We're 25 miles from King's Cross. We've got another 20 minutes of running. And you can see since I've had the wiper off just how much liquid now is on the screen. From gaps in between stations. A little bit of water on the midstream doesn't necessarily have, you don't have to necessarily have the wiper on the whole time. You can usually see quite fine. It's either your flames only just started, or more to the point, if it's really heavy rain, sometimes the water just can't keep up. But if it's just intermittent, sometimes you might not even worry with the one. Some of that's just personal preference, where you happen to be. What has happened, if you have a look on YouTube, there's actually some interesting video of what happens when train operators change and the sort of steps that they'll do and the sort of time that it takes company A. Let's say, we'll use the example on this train, on the Azuma. When it came into service as the Azuma, it was run by Virgin Trains. Now, as we see from the outside, it's still the Azuma train. That name was able to be carried across under agreement, I believe. So there would have been a time where the Virgin name had to be taken off the train. What can happen is that for a little bit of time, roundabout logos, or it might just have temporary logos put on before it's actually reskinned. And it's so much easier now compared to actually having to paint the characters. It's a lot easier now for vinyl reskinning and wasting and that sort of stuff. And they do this amazing thing, this amazing time-lapse footage of this sort of process, usually in the UK, because it seems to happen a fair bit where the train operating company loses the contract, and so the rolling stock will go to the new operator, but not necessarily, of course, the branding. Now, the operator might want to totally change the look. Sometimes you can incorporate the colours of the trains that they still have. You don't make changes to the logo. The branding changes could be more subtle. Say, for instance, LNER, which is the company that's on this train at the moment. Let's say they lose the contract and Great Western take over. Great Western's mainly green. LNER's on this train, there's a lot of red. So GWR, if they were to take it over, wouldn't want any part of this train to be red. They'd want to get it into green as soon as they could. Because if you see this train out and about, even if it doesn't have the LNER logos, because it's red, you're not thinking of Great Western, because, well, Great Western's predominantly associated with green. Now, there are other ways around it. Now, I know especially in buses, there's a big move for buses to have operate with the one colour scheme, regardless of who the operator is. There might be a small operator logo somewhere on the train, or on the bus in this case, but it doesn't matter who's operating it. The colour of the bus is still the same, and the classic example, talking of the UK where this video is the London red buses. They've kept the buses in red, but they're not always operated by the same operator. But to the public, they just see a London red double-decker bus. They don't necessarily know or care if it's operated by one company or the other, because it's overseen by the, in this case, Transport for London. So we're 7 miles out from King's Cross now, so we'll stay in the cab. I'll just put the wipers back on. The speed will be starting to reduce as we get a little bit closer. We're coming into South Gate now. So we've got a 95 board coming up shortly, just got advanced warning of that on the speed sign. We're still getting our green signal ding, which is excellent. So we've just gone into our 95 section, so that's fine, and we should really need to speed up now. We've 5 miles to go before our next and only stop at King's Cross. shouldn't be a lot of reason to necessarily speed up. Just sort of keep this pace for the moment. You know, we've got clear signals, so we don't necessarily need to slow down for signals at this point. In about a mile and a half, I can see at the bottom of the screen there's a 90 mile an hour board coming up. Now if the signals stay green as they are at the moment, we can maintain this sort of pace and we'll come up nicely to that 90 mile an hour board. Just coasting as we have been now for miles, don't necessarily need to speed up. Now in the meantime, if the signals start getting more restrictive, well then we'll need to start braking. But for this point in time, it's relatively level track, so we don't have to worry about powering up and down hills at this stage. So that's handy. We're a little bit under the speed limit at the moment, but it's a nice flow coming onto the 90 board, and then after that we've got an 80 board coming up at a 65 and 80 just after Finsbury Park. But I do know that we're going to have to start having to start to, okay, restrictive signals, here we go, we better start to brake, not power. Now I need to start bringing the train speed down because the automatic warning system gave us advanced warning, as the name suggests, that we need to start braking for signals and changes in the speed limits, and the signals are in our favour again, so we can stop braking. We can build up some speed, but not really, you know, at 2.5 miles out. So there's no real need to try and get back up to the 90. Now as long as we keep our snow just disappeared. Well, the rain certainly did. So there's no need to try and get up to the 80. We've got a 65 coming up, so we should start slowing down for that. We should have been a lot slower. The trains helped us brake there. So we need to start looking out for signals closer together. Speed limits reducing as we get closer to King's Cross. You know, got a 60 board coming up. We're comfortably underneath that. The signals are in our favour at the moment, being a long distance passenger service. You'd expect that. So we've got a 60, then a 45, then a 15, then we're coming into King's Cross. So we will start to slow things down. Our next major board that we have to worry about is 45. That's power. Need to brake, not power. So signals are still good for us. We'll need to start braking a little bit more. Signals starting to come against us now. We're out of the platform 1 across. So now we'll just take our time coasting in. We know that we've got some restricted signals coming up, not necessarily at stop, but restricted. Oh, there's an interesting. just basically have to follow your nose at this point. Use the signal indications for you. So we've been routed to platform 1. So nice and slowly now there's passengers, or if this was a passenger service, there'd be passengers starting to get up, get their luggage, that sort of thing. 15 miles an hour coming into the platform, then we'll have to slow down further as we approach the buffer stops. So this is a nice gentle speed to be coming in. Now of course you know how long your train is, and by experience you'll know where the particular trains have to stop according to their length and local operating procedures and whatnot. I'll probably turn the wiper off now. Just a little bit more power, but not much. Now we can stay on the brake a little bit. We're a long train, so we'll go as far as we can. They might not necessarily have car markers in this simulator, but in the real world they probably would. So a little bit more brake just to slow things down. That will do us. So we have arrived. That is absolutely a fantastic view of King's Cross there. One point that I was making on the previous episode, maybe do it this way. You can see with this particular train is that you've got the front carriage is usable for passengers because you've got all your equipment throughout the whole train. You just got the cab for the driver at the front, and the rest of the carriage is usable for passengers. Whereas if you look at the high-speed train, whoops. Excuse my poor camera work. Yes, this will do for this situation. You can see here with the high-speed train and the HST behind us, the front power car, its sole purpose is basically for the driver to drive the train, and the engine and the mechanical side and all of that sort of stuff can't be used by passengers. And so the good thing about the trains like the Azuma is that the entire train can be used for passengers, and what that also means that you have to stop in the right position, because you need to use as much of the platform as you can, whereas in a different situation with the HST you can afford to have the power car off the platform because the driver might not necessarily have to have access to the platform, but the passengers certainly do. So I hope you've enjoyed this. A little bit of a chat, a little bit of a drive, and it was certainly a different looking train, and just goes to show what you can do with a little bit of colour. Anywho, I'm Simulated Irk. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you've enjoyed. More Train Simulator coming soon. Some new episodes of Train Sim World coming out very soon, with the Train Sim World 2 coming out very, very shortly in August 2020, featuring the London Underground, the Bakerloo line. That's going to be fantastic. More information at simulatedgaming.com. Don't forget to like, subscribe, smash that like button or whatever it is the kids are saying, I'm not sure. Hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget, tracks are for trains and stay behind the yellow line. And I'll see you next time. Bye for now.